So we thought we'd spend a few minutes now talking about thinking styles. We've talked on other videos about addressing the content of thinking, but it's very important to be aware that when you get upset, the style of your thinking changes, and Jim and I are going to try and pull out the ways in which, when we become upset, our thinking patterns are significantly disrupted. Maybe we should focus first of all, Jim, on the more anxious type thinking. So if you're having a fight-flight response and you're anxious, what sort of distortions would you expect to get in your thinking?
Well, if we take an extreme case of anxiety, I guess a panic attack would be a good example of that, where there's that intense physical anxiety, is that people often do something called catastrophizing, to take an American style word, or catastrophic thinking, which is the idea that you think something catastrophic is imminently about to take place.
Yeah, when you've just had a small thing go wrong, you make a bit of a jump.
Yeah, so for example, you might notice some chest tension or pain, and you might be interpreting that as indication that you're about to have a heart attack.
Yeah, so you overread the situation and go from what a minor bad thing to a disaster within 0 to 90 in 60 seconds sort of thing.
And the problem with this being that the more you catastrophize when you're feeling panicky, the worse it makes you panic.
Yeah.
So it becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah, that's good. Any other things that we can associate particularly with anxiety thinking? You've talked about catastrophizing. What about thoughts about self and others? If you're anxious, what's likely to happen to your thinking processes when you reflect upon yourself and your self-worth, your self-respect?
I think maybe seeing yourself as somebody that can't cope with a particular situation, maybe viewing other people as ones that can.
Right.
So there's a sense of kind of just being different and separate from other people. And then that may be making somebody feel quite self-conscious. In extreme cases, paranoid.
So you're talking about two different activities there. One of them is you think about yourself in a less good way, and the other one is that you make comparisons that are unfavourable to yourself. Yeah, and other people, you might see them as more competent, and also I guess you might get a bit paranoid and see them as unkind or out to get you in some way, or not sympathetic or not understanding.
Yeah.
That would be another process, I guess. What else can we think of? You might want to talk about magical thinking, maybe? What would happen with that?
For people that have obsessive compulsive problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Magical thinking is this idea of almost that our thoughts have more power to them than we might consider actually true.
Mm-hmm.
So an example might be if I think there's going to be a plane crash, then there might be more likely for one to take place.
Right, so you might actually make things happen by thinking, or stop things happening by thinking.
Yeah. So there's a phrase for this which is called thought-event fusion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fusing the idea of that thoughts can cause events to happen. And it's magical because what we know is this is sort of superstitious in nature, and that thoughts don't actually have the power to make things happen in that way.
Right, yeah. And then another sort of distortion that creeps into people's thinking would be selective abstraction, good and bad. Could you say something about how that works?
So let's say, for example, you were studying and you were trying to perform well in an exam. You might come out of that afterwards thinking that you hadn't done very well at all.
Mm-hmm.
But what you might be doing is abstracting any kind of evidence or examples of where you might have performed well in that. So you're disqualifying it. You're overly focusing on the negative aspects of what's just happened.
Right, so you're both amplifying the negative things and you're downplaying the other things that would be on the other side of the argument. You're not taking a balanced view.
Yes, yeah. Alternatively, I mean, you said good and bad.
Yeah.
Let's say you're a Premier League football player, and you think of yourself as a really good player, and you have a game, and maybe your manager doesn't think that you've played that well, and you're overly focusing on the things that you did do well, and not really acknowledging the aspects that there was a period of the game where you weren't putting in much effort, for example, of that. So you're disqualifying that sort of stuff as well, to try and hold on to the notion that actually you maintained a standard that you're wanting to achieve.
So are you saying there that the distortions can go either way, that you can pump up either the good or the bad?
Absolutely.
You can cause distortions in either direction. And I suppose the distortions in the way of thinking you were better than you were could be equally disabling, because you're out of touch with reality in a sense, aren't you? And you're going to fall, you're going to look stupid if you over-aggrandise yourself or pump yourself up, and that's not in touch with reality. You see that you're too big for your boots, basically.
And you might, in terms of just trying to hold on to some self-esteem, you might be quite sort of defensive against that, feeling quite frustrated, feeling quite angry that somebody else is pointing out something which maybe is quite difficult to hear.
Doesn't fit with what you want to think. Yeah. I wonder about whether you could say something about personalising, what personalising might involve, and how people sometimes personalise. I suppose you, by definition, you say they're impersonal events. So, can you say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the word kind of is quite self-explanatory in that we might take, say, maybe a comment that somebody's made, or a decision that maybe a manager has made at work, that, let's say there's a project that doesn't involve us as an employee. We might over-personalise that, thinking, oh, I'm not good enough, my manager doesn't think I'm up to the task. So it feels like it's a personal decision that your manager has made. But maybe the project is just, in reality, suited to somebody else's skills, or if it's done on making sure that people have their fair turn, that it's done in that way.
Yeah, so it's not a judgment. It's not a judgment on you, but you see it as a judgment on you. You find a way of distorting the information and making it feel as though it's a bad thing about you.
Yeah, and if we were linking that to kind of deeper sense of self, that it might be linked to strong negative core beliefs about feeling inadequate.
Okay, so I think we've pretty much covered the different sorts of distortions, or at least we've surveyed the field a bit. What are we saying to people about what they should do about this if they can recognise that some of them, and we all have these, we all do these things some of the time, so if people watching this video can recognise that they're doing these things, what do they do? So what's the next stage, as it were?
Well, I guess intuitively you might just say, stop it.
That would be a good thing to say, yeah.
But we all know that that's not so easily done.
Yeah.
The key here is to become aware of it, to begin with.
Yeah.
And noting whether something like this is going on. So it does come back to evaluating your thoughts in some way. If you're aware of kind of what the hot thought is, or what the emotive thought is in terms of your own distress, you can ask yourself the question, is there some kind of bias or unhelpful interpretation going on in my style of thinking here that's happening just because I'm under stress? So am I jumping to conclusions? Am I just seeing the good and not the bad, or the other way around? And if you are noticing that that's the case, that can really prompt you then to start asking other questions about your thoughts. Maybe going to the point of looking for the evidence for and the evidence against, or looking for a more helpful way of seeing it. Yeah,
and we should link this up with the other video we did on the fight-flight response, and make the connection that what you think is going to affect how your physical body, what your physical body does. So if you do this stuff that we're talking about, this negative thinking, this unhelpful thinking, then you're going to kick off distress in your body, aren't you? You're going to make yourself feel anxious or distressed and low. And if you modify your thinking, or identify these biases and gently pull yourself back to a more reality-based thinking, then your upsetness will tend to dissipate a bit. In other words, you can talk yourself out of the mood by being a little bit firm and not indulging in that sort of over-the-top thinking of, oh my goodness, it's raining today and what's the point? You can talk yourself out of that and say, well, hang on, it's raining on other people as well, it's not just me, we don't have to personalise bad weather. And there are other things to do other than go out. If it's wet, you can find something else to do, so you don't have to turn everything into another bad thing and sort of collect bad things, which is what we tend to do when we start getting anxious and depressed, isn't it? We start collecting, like people used to collect green show stamps, we start collecting bad things and listing them to ourselves, seeing ourselves as having a bad time more than we need to. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. And I hope that's helped you to think a little bit about your own patterns of thinking and to reflect on whether you may be having some thinking biases that you might want to address and think a bit more about your thinking.